Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing remarkably well. And go and spoil yourself, get yourself something lovely to drink, because I've got a fabulous story for you tonight. So before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, when me and my wife Blanche decided that retirement was very much on the cards for us, we left our busy, bustling lives in New York City to retreat to a quiet, more tranquil, idyllic haven in Maine, which is a state in New England in the United States, bordered by New Hampshire to the west, the Gulf of Maine to the southeast, the Canadian provinces of New Brunswick and Quebec to the northeast and the northwest. Me and my wife had visited Maine on numerous occasions for holidays in the past. We were attracted to the bayshore, the jagged coastline, the smoothly contoured mountains, the heavily forested interior, picturesque waterways, low-lying wild blueberry bushes, and delectable seafood cuisine. Let's just say Maine boasts some of the most fabulous seafood restaurants, offering the best lobster and clams that you've ever tasted in your life. Suffice to say, there were many temptations seducing us to live in this part of the world. Me and my wife were exhausted from our tireless property searches and had almost given up bothering to look until we learnt about an attractive property for sale in Andover, Oxford County, set among the mountains and along the Appalachian Trail. We were cautiously watching our wallets, eagerly looking to strike a great deal. By all accounts, this was a colonial property that had been on the market for 4 years and had not been snapped up yet, which seemed rather incredulous for Maine, as property in this part of the world is highly sought after and incredibly desirable. Ostensibly, we had understood that the house was in a great state of repair. It seemed rather bizarre that a house of such historic intrigue, situated on a fabulous property, overlooking picturesque mountain views, was going for such a song. We made an appointment to see the property as soon as possible. I remember I had a good feeling that fate was finally smiling on us magnanimously, and that we may have potentially found the retirement home of our dreams, which would not be very far from our older daughter and our 2 grandchildren. For us it was upsizing rather than downsizing, which is possibly rather strange for a retired couple, but we enjoyed our space, and for so long we had paid a fortune in New York City to live in a tiny self-contained flatlet in a good area, so the idea of having plenty of legroom was very attractive and appealing to us. It was such a beautiful sunny day when me and my wife got ready for our 12 o'clock appointment with an estate agent called Bryce Finnegan. I was feeling as if I had butterflies in my stomach. That morning I only managed to down a cup of coffee, which is highly unusual for me, as it's not much that puts me off starting the day with a good breakfast. My wife had not even managed that. It was literally impossible for her to eat a single thing. She claimed to feel nauseous. Blanche always became flustered when she was excited, and would lose everything moments before we were about to set off. "I can't think where I put my glasses," she said. "Oh, and I forgot my windbreaker. Where is it? I can't remember where I put it. Supposing it gets cool." I could see my wife was dawdling. She was procrastinating. "Hurry up, Blanche, dear. We don't want the estate agent thinking that we've blown him off." I don't think Blanche was intentionally stalling. It was as if she was unconsciously terribly afraid that the hopes we had nurtured together about this property were about to go pear-shaped. We had pinned our hopes on moving to Maine, and this property on paper had almost directly spoken to our hearts, and going at such a great price, it was hard to envisage that there wasn't something terribly wrong with the place. Imagine if it didn't live up to our expectations. Blanche continued her nervous twitching in the car, which was beginning to heartily annoy me. She was fiddling with the buttons on her cashmere sweater and playing with a couple of locks of her grey hair that had escaped her ponytail. My wife looked younger than her years, with a flawless unlined skin, blue eyes and a full head of grey hair, and it suited her. "Would you stop twitching, dear? You're distracting me." I'm scared, really scared, she says to me. She continues to twiddle her hair.
What are you scared about, Blanche?
About the house, of course. I so want to like it. I want to like it with all my heart. I want to live in Maine, and this house sounds so perfect. But what if I don't like it? What if there really is something wrong with it?
Like what? I ask.
I don't know, but a colonial house going this cheap? It's suspicious, is it not? I mean, people love heritage houses. So why has this not been snapped up in a heartbeat? I keep thinking black mold, termites, rats. Something's off.
Sweetheart, you're getting your knickers in a twist all about nothing. Even if we don't like the house, it's not a train smash, nor is it the end of the world. We'll find somewhere else to live. Besides, if there's black mold or an issue with termites, that has to be disclosed to us. They can't hide those kind of things from us.
But if the house doesn't tick all the boxes, we'll never find a bargain like this again. I bit my lip, knowing my wife's words were absolutely right. It was peculiarly odd that the house hadn't been snapped up sooner. It would be the first question I would ask the estate agent about, I decided to myself privately. When we arrived at the property, the estate agent was standing with his back turned away from us, smoking a cigarette against his truck. On hearing our truck driving down the white dirt road, veering onto the red brick driveway, he quickly threw his cigarette onto the ground, pressing it into the red bricks with his crocodile skin boots, and turned around to look at us as he waited patiently for me to park my truck in the driveway.
So what do you think?
I asked my wife, as we stare very briefly at the house.
It's beautiful, she piped. So beautiful. I could see tears misting up in her eyes. Imagine living in a place like this. I'm so afraid something's going to go wrong in this viewing. I already feel an attraction to this house, and we haven't even looked inside it yet. The house was a red brick colonial. It was a 2-story rectangular-shaped home. Probably far too big for us, but as I said before, that was not really a concern. We had lived in a cramped New York apartment for far too long, and we would easily welcome all this extra space, especially when the grandchildren came over to stay with us, or our son Russell and his family, that still lived in New York, would possibly enjoy spending their holidays up at the house, and we could easily devote the upper floors to their use. As getting older, we possibly would not be using the upper floor ourselves, unless we installed some kind of a lift system. The house had 5 windows across the front, 3 windows jutting out of the roof, and 4 on the ground floor, 2 on either side of the front door, which was framed by an extended enclosure, with a roof and columns and steps that led to the door. There were modish black shutters outside every window, elegantly matching the black slate roof, giving the house a polished, debonair impression that was pleasing on the eye in its contemporary chic deportment. There was a very tasteful garage right next to the house with an upstairs room, so space on this property seemed to be in bountiful supply. On the horizon were the prepossessing, undulating, folding contours of the mountains that squatted lazily, like voluptuous ladies, sunbathing under a warm sun. The sky was beautiful, without a cloud in sight, while the estate was fringed to the rear by a sumptuous-looking pine forest, where needled boughs vertically pirouetted into the sky, lending a viridescent splendour to the landscape. I climb out of our red Dodge Viper, opening up my wife's door. She climbs out, looking at me nervously. The estate agent is tall. He's 6 foot with a silvery mane of grey hair. Although he's not old, I'd guess he's in his 30s, but his hair has turned grey before its time, but it rather suits him. He reaches out to shake our hands.
Bryce Finnegan, I'm delighted to meet the both of you. I'll be showing you the property today. Do you have any questions before we proceed along our way? I do, as it happens. I understand, from all my research, that this property has been on the market for 4 years now. That's quite a long time. Why has it not sold? Based from what I can see about the pristine condition of the place, you would think it would have been snapped up in a heartbeat. It is a very curious question you ask, Mr. Zimmerman, and honestly, I don't have an answer to give you. We've had a huge amount of interest in this property. It's been under offer over 20 times, and all the offers have just fallen through for the most bizarre reasons, which is why the owners have dropped their asking price. In all my years as an estate agent, I've never seen so many deals fall through like this, for inexplicable reasons, or the buyers just suddenly losing interest and getting cold feet in the property when they were dead set on buying it. Let's just say this is the most idiosyncratic house I've ever had on my books. A house that I thought I would sell the next day, where people have shown so much interest and excitement in the place, and then the offers just fall through left, right and centre. Some of my colleagues believe this place is jinxed, and I'm beginning to believe they might just be right. Now, I do have other properties on my books you might prefer to look at. In truth, I don't fancy my chances of selling this place to you or anyone else. It's almost like the house wants to be left alone and is refusing to be sold. And we've had some mean offers on this place over the last 4 years.
I once heard houses are like people, says my wife, intervening. She studies the house through her eyes rather affectionately, as if the house has rather warmed itself to her. Maybe it's just looking for the right owner. Maybe that's what this is all about. The house is just being very selective.
Never heard that one before, said the estate agent. But, ma'am, I do hope you're right. The owners are on to us all the time to get this place sold, and we're trying our level best.
I rub my hands over my day-old stubble that my daughter insists looks very hip, and that I find rather uncomfortable.
Did the buyers give you any explanation as to why they're actually selling? Yes, they said they wanted to downsize. But I have to tell you, a friend of mine sold them a property in Brunswick, and let's just say it's bigger than this house, so I'm at a loss of words about that. Let's just say the enigmatic peculiarities of people never ceases to amaze me as an agent.
At this I'm stumped.
They told you they want to downsize, yet they bought a bigger property in Brunswick? That's right. It is very odd, I know. It's about the sum of it, says the estate agent, shrugging his shoulders. Any more questions, or would you like to see the inside of the house now?
We'd love to go in, says my wife excitedly. Let's just say I was in absolute awe of this property. It was magnificent. There are no other words to describe it. It was as if no expense had been spared. There were grand entranceways, large marble fireplaces, polished wooden floors, glitzy chandeliers, and there was a light approach to millwork and wainscoting. The house was painted in highly desirable neutral shades, and there were black and white tiles in the entrance hall, a huge ornate sweeping staircase, and a state-of-the-art kitchen. I pointed to a side staircase that veered under the main floor.
And this? Where does this go to? What are these steps for? Oh, that's the cellar, I was told. I'll lead the way if you like.
I followed the estate agent down to the cellar, to find the 2 doors were boarded up very extensively, which I found very bizarre.
Why is the cellar boarded up like this? I asked in surprise. Not sure, said the estate agent. The owner said something about it being terribly cold down there. It might be a good place for you to store some wine. That is very peculiar, I say, studying the boarded-up cellar. I mean, they've gone to town on this. They've boarded this place up extensively. It looks like they're trying to keep something out. I mean, couldn't they just keep it locked? It does look rather that way, agreed the estate agent. But as I tell you, people never cease to amaze me. Their quirky habits, their strange behaviours. I can tell you, nothing ever surprises me.
Suffice to say, my wife and I held our breaths, praying that nothing would go wrong in the purchasing of this lofty property. After all, with so many sales falling through for the place, we had no reason to believe that the same eventuality that had afflicted so many before us, eager to purchase this place, would not also occur to us. So we crossed our fingers tightly, and of course our toes, and prayed with all our hearts that nothing would go awry. And surprise, surprise, against all the odds,
The sale for the property went through seamlessly, without a single hitch. And when Bryce Finnegan phoned us to congratulate us and inform us that we were now the legal owners of the colonial home, I remember he said,
"I think your wife was absolutely right. It was clear. The house chose you. It was waiting for the right owners to come along. Congratulations on your new home. I do hope you'll be very happy there."
Me and my wife Blanche thought we'd won the lottery. We danced around our kitchen with joy, hugging each other and envisaging a great future that lay ahead of us. We had procured a dream home in Maine at a steal of a price in an idyllic part of the world, where we would retire and enjoy visits from our grandchildren. What could possibly go wrong? 8 months later. Me and my wife Blanche were so happy, so settled in our brand new home. It was all we could have wanted, and so much more. Our buxom property was nestled indulgently in a pristine valley, surrounded by exquisite transfixing views, where the smooth contours of the mountains billowed up demonstratively into the cobalt blue sky, with a Junesque, seductive, commanding but poised grace. The manicured lawn of our backyard boasted a riot of pretty flower beds, along with several mature oak trees that stood out proud, regal, tall, like assertive, self-possessed giants, with powerful trunks, huge branches, flaunting a bounty of verdant leaves. The yard folded seamlessly into a flowery meadow, where knee-high grass was bespeckled with wild flowers, and fringed by the most glorious pine forest, comprised predominantly of eastern white fir trees. It was here where I took Phoenix, our golden retriever, for regular walks. The forest was covered in pine needles and smelt magnificent. Its paths were steep and precipitous, as smooth stone seemed to cobble the pathway in an upward trajectory, like an old narrow cobblestone street from yesteryear. Suffice to say, our grandchildren frequented our property and adored exploring this woodgrove, delighting in the wildlife that visited our premises, including a black bear that was openly observed at night, looking at us through the windows with its bright yellow eyes, something my grandchildren thought was absolutely marvellous. They had inordinately begged me to make them a treehouse. I've always been very good with my hands that way, and they had pointed to a large oak tree in the middle of the meadow that overlooked the forest as the quintessential perfect location for this house. And their unrepressed, unbridled, contagious enthusiasm about this idea seemed to inspire me to get cracking with the project. But then where would I work? I was thinking of using the outside garage for this when my wife Blanche suggested that I consider using the old cellar that was boarded up. I thought that was a brilliant idea. But to get an idea of whether it was actually an appropriate place for me to work or not, those boards would naturally need to come down. I was more than a little startled at closer inspection how well the doors to the cellar had been bolted, sealed up, clamped and screwed down. It was idiosyncratic behaviour, and looked like the family was actually trying to keep something out, as the anchored doors were fastened so securely they were pretty much deadlocked, rather like Fort Knox. I thought about the estate agent's comments about the quirky, enigmatic behaviour of people, and decided that people who had owned this property before us were rather eccentric. Maybe they thought cellars were damp, musty, mildewed, mouldy, and unventilated, and should be avoided at all costs. People could be strange. With a great deal of banging, pounding, hammering, buffeting and bashing, along with a sheer brute force, coupled by my resolute determination, I finally succeeded in getting those boards down. But it was a laborious, insufferable, draining job, but well worth my tenacious, long-suffering efforts. When I finally opened the cellar door, it protested furiously, as it reluctantly squeaked open. It was crying out to be oiled, that was for sure. I was amazed that the whole place was incredibly dusty, with mouse droppings, spider webs, and a plethora of dust that carpeted and caked everything thickly. But it was an Aladdin's cave for me, a carpenter's dream, the quintessential lumberer workshop, with overhead racks supporting different-sized wooden panels. There was a workbench against one of the walls, where a selection of expensive stationary tools stood up in a precise order, all in great condition,
There were a couple of large carpenter's tables, one with piles of wood neatly displayed under it, and there were shelves with plastic containers, perfectly labelled. There were a couple of storage cabinets, and there were portable power tools. Everything a carpenter could possibly need. I was coughing and spluttering as the dust angrily invaded my lungs, and there was a cold, icy chill that enveloped the room. But truly, I didn't care. This cellar was a dream. "Blanche! Blanche!" I called. "Come down! See this! Come and see what I've found here!" Blanche moved down the steps rapidly and gasped. "You've got to be kidding me! Some of this stuff is so expensive, so pricey. This looks like a professional carpenter's workshop. Who in their right mind boards up a room like this and leaves all this stuff behind them? You've got to admit, it's weird." I discovered some splotches of blood in one corner of the workshop that hadn't been cleared up, which I found peculiar. At first I thought they were rust stains of some kind, but the trajectory of the splattering against the wall and the floor looked ominously like blood. I discreetly cleaned it all up with a damp, warm cloth, deciding I didn't want my wife to know about this, as her imagination would likely draw some horrifying conclusions. I thought I figured out what must have happened here. It would also explain a lot. I think perhaps the owner had had an accident of some kind, and his wife had put her foot down and told her husband he was not to go near his power tools again, and boarded up his workshop. People can overreact when someone has an accident. I'd seen it before. I knew a woman who fell off her horse and sold the horse the very next day, as if in some way the horse was entirely responsible for her fortuitous fall. You know the saying, a bad workman always blames his tools. Before long I was working in my workshop every day, with the radio blaring away happily in the background, offering me entertainment to while away the long hours. My wife told me she wanted an outdoor table and chairs before I actually planned the treehouse for my grandchildren, so I was working on and off between two projects. I could not comprehend for the life of me why my cellar was so numbingly cold, even in the middle of a scorching, sizzling hot summer. Sometimes my frosty hands would go so numb it was hard to work in those icy, frigid conditions. Even when I breathed out, there'd be a polar white mist blowing out of my mouth. And in the hot summer months, that's not normal. I brought down a gas heater to warm up the room, but despite my very best industrious efforts, the heater did nothing to remove or even moderately improve the piercing Arctic chill. It seemed as if the supercilious, inhospitable cellar was perennially insistent on remaining like a freezer. Truly, it would have been the perfect room as a walk-in refrigerator for a chef. My golden retriever Phoenix, who liked to lie at my feet routinely, refused to enter that cellar, but would stand outside the door, growling, her hair standing on end. Sometimes she would bark, as if she could see someone standing there that she didn't like, and then she would whimper and trot away, where she would hang around with my wife all day, until I'd finished spending time in the cellar, and then she would dutifully return to my side. She would sniff me intently, as if I'd been hanging around with other dogs, and her tail would stop wagging. I'd often wonder what she was actually smelling on me, because whatever it was, she didn't like it. "I wonder why Phoenix refuses to go into that cellar," my wife would say. Within days of working in the cellar, strange things began to happen, things I could not explain. I'd get this horrible feeling I was not alone. I could feel a presence so clearly in the room with me, so much so that I would turn around and say, "Blanche, is that you?" But no one was there. The feeling was so bodefully airy, spooky, hauntingly discomposing, incredibly unsettling. I'd feel as if a hostile, malevolent, hateful pair of eyes were boring into me, but nothing was there. I felt so watched, so studied, so observed. The radio would start to go static, and a growl would emanate from the radio, and I'd think, what the hell? Where did that growl come from? I would finally examine the radio, checking it thoroughly, and would get it to work all over again. But then it would skip to different channels all on its own, and sometimes become static again, and then I would hear that growling sound. I decided the radio was on the blink, so I switched it off and continued to work.
On one occasion, I felt a cold air blowing against my face, as if someone was breathing on me. I would run my hand across my neck and think to myself, am I going mad? Was this cold air in the cellar playing tricks with my mind? I'd often smell the sulphurous rotten smell. It would be there 1 minute and gone the next. I really thought I was losing it. A bad smell doesn't just vanish like that. Never once did it occur to me that something outer-worldly might be going on. At this time my wife was beginning to experience strange things herself in the house, but she chose to keep these accounts a clandestine secret from me, lest I would accuse her of going stir-crazy. Blanche's account. I will admit, the moment those doors to the downstairs cellar were open, the energy in our home changed dramatically, and I noticed it at once. I was exceedingly bothered about our golden retriever's reaction to the cellar. I knew it wasn't natural for our easy-going dog to react so adversely to a room in our home, and when my husband returned from working with his lumber, Phoenix would smell him all over. It was curiously bizarre behaviour that I could not fathom. Sometimes she smelt something on him that she found abhorrent. She would growl at that spot on his clothing, as if she was warning off a violent thug. One day when my husband is working in the cellar, I was making a cake using my Kenwood mixer and filling 2 cake tins with chocolate cake mix. I walk over to the sink that overlooks pretty views onto the backyard and place the dirty dishes into the warm soapy suds. I'm washing one of the dishes when I happen to glance up, and I see what I can only describe as a figure darting past the window. It happened so quickly that I thought to myself, I must have imagined things. It was a trick of the light. It was so blurry, so vague. I meandered to the kitchen door and glanced outside, calling, "Hello, is anyone out there?" But I'm met by a wall of stiff silence. But an uneasy feeling trickles down the back of my spine. I didn't see anything, but I smell the most obnoxious odour, like nothing I've ever smelt before or since. It was like a sulphurous, rotting smell, but the scent dissipates, almost as if I never smelt it at all. I shake my head, returning to my kitchen, only to find that my kitchen has become as cold as an icebox, and there is an ominous trail of muddy footprints all over the kitchen floor. To my amazement, the prints are shaped like a massive dog, or a wolf or something like that, but the paws are humongous in size, much, much bigger than a dog. I don't know of a dog that could have paws this big. What the hell? What the hell? What the hell are these? I think. For a moment, I think that something creeped into the kitchen a moment ago, when I went outside for a brief second. But how could they have got past me? A dangerous animal of some kind. A mountain lion, perhaps. No, that's a crazy notion. I pull out a knife from my knife block and search the kitchen, but nothing is there. I suddenly realise that Phoenix is nowhere to be seen. But then, when I find her, she's cowering behind the door of the pantry and trembling like a leaf. Moments later, I feel this icy wind blowing past me, like a hairdryer of freezing air. And then the kitchen door slams closed on its own, as if being blown back by a huge gust of wind. The trouble is, there's no wind out there. I'm about to call my husband to point out these strange anomalies, but the muddy paw prints have gone, and I'm now beginning to feel terribly silly. What's wrong with me? Then a horrible thought enters my mind. I'm getting older. Could I be losing my mind and getting some kind of neurological disease, some form of Alzheimer's? Please God, no. I don't want to end up being completely dilly. But I remind myself that Phoenix has reacted to something adversely, and that I'm not imagining. So I can't be losing it, surely. I get down on my hands and knees and cuddle my dog in my arms to reassure him. I can see that Phoenix is quivering. A small tormenting voice whispers to me, "Blanche, you're going mad. You're going mad. You're going mad." Either that or something is going on in my home. The next few days are routinely uneventful. I'm beginning to think that the strange events I thought had happened were all but a figment of an overactive imagination on my part. I'm in the kitchen making a chicken pot pie. I'm creating a bechamel sauce and have stripped a cooked chicken of all its meat, when I suddenly feel an icy chill descend over the kitchen. It is so conspicuously dramatic that it sends a feeling of dread burning through my body.
It is then that I feel something or someone blowing on my neck. I turn around from the range with a wooden spoon in my hand, and I see that Phoenix has her lips curled back. She's growling at something fiercely, but there's nothing there. When I say there's nothing there, that's not entirely true, because I unequivocally knew there was actually something there. But the trouble was I couldn't see it at all, but I could feel it with every single fibre of my being. And whatever this thing was, it was insanely evil, grotesquely despicable. Phoenix had plunged herself in front of me protectively. She continues to growl and snarl at what I can only describe as an evil entity or presence. The next thing I know, the back door of my kitchen flings furiously open on its own accord. The door crashes angrily against the outside wall. Phoenix is hauled into the air like a netball, about 8 feet off the ground, as if she's been flung onto someone's shoulders. She looks terrified. Her ears are pinned back. She's oscillating her paws, trying to defend herself. She's hurled out of the door so violently, like a soccer ball. Phoenix crashes to the ground, and for a dreadful moment, I think she's dead. I sigh with relief when she whimpers, finally staggers to her feet, and runs away from our house, charging as fast as she can towards the woodgrove. In a trice, the cold air seems to rush past me and give chase. I can see Phoenix dashing away. She continues to run, while dreadful images flood my imagination. That thing, whatever it is, I know it's going to kill Phoenix. I know it. My whole body convulses, as if I'd been standing in a puddle of water and been electrocuted. You'd think I'd scream, call my husband, do something. But I found myself just peeing on the kitchen floor. My whole body shivers and quakes, as if I'd been exposed to the blistering conditions of Arctic air in Siberia. I want to scream, but nothing comes out of my dry, scratchy throat. My mouth bobs open and closes for several times, but nothing comes out. Well, that's the end of part 1. Part 2 is tomorrow. Until next time, goodbye and good night.